Hello, folks. This is Jacob Harkey. It's November 18th, 2024, and it's been a little bit since the last time I chatted with you all, last time I popped on here. And a lot has happened in the world since the last time I popped on here. Now, on this channel, there are a handful of different things that I've focused on. I've focused on politics, I've focused on Palestine, but what I really started focusing on when I began live streaming on this channel is Scientology. And as you'll see from the title of this video is titled Love and Support to Mike Rinder. For those who don't know, Mike Rinder is an ex-Scientologist and ex-Sea Org member and former board member of the Aftermath Foundation. He was in Scientology from the time that he was 6 in 1961 when his parents got involved in Scientology in Australia. He joined Scientology's internal clergy, the Sea Organization, when he was 18 in 1973. He worked directly with L. Ron Hubbard. He went on to work directly under David Miscavige, serving as a Scientology executive. He was held prisoner in the hole at Scientology's international base in Riverside County, California, until he escaped in 2007. Since his escape, he has written a book. He has starred in and produced 3 seasons of the documentary TV show Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath. He's done a nearly daily blog for many years. He's traveled around the world at his own expense to speak with law enforcement officers and agencies, to speak with attorneys. He's somebody who I greatly admire. And for those who don't know, he is currently battling advanced cancer. Now, I've linked to his blog in the description of this video. And if you look at his blog, if you look at his recent posts, within the last week, he shared a series of videos speaking a bit about his current situation. He certainly looks changed for those who can recall what he looked and sounded like back when he was healthy, before he was battling the cancer that he's currently battling. And he explained in his videos that he has exhausted the efficacy of 2 cancer drugs. And now, at the stage that he's in, he and his family are looking at alternative methods of healing so that he can pursue wellness as he battles the horrific illness that he's battling. I won't get too into the details of what exactly it is that he discusses in his videos, but there's a few things that I wanted to share in addition to just pouring out love and support for Mike Rinder. I'm not oblivious to the fact that there has been controversy or drama, whatever you want to call it, within this world over the last year. And I want to say something that I believe is important to any activist cause. Whenever, as an activist or as a survivor, if you're standing up against abuse, if you're standing up for the oppressed, the voices of the oppressed, the voices of the abused should be amplified and centered. I believe that, and that's something that I can apply to many different situations. Thus, when talking about justice for victims of Scientology, ex-Scientologists, critics of Scientology, should be centered. Their voices should be amplified. That does grow complicated when people within the community fight with each other. In other words, if I see that it's important, if I see it as important to center the voices of ex-Scientologists, but many ex-Scientologists are pointing fingers at each other, who is the right person to center? And it's certainly something that I've wrestled with over the last year or so. And I guess just to give a little bit more background about how long I have been paying attention to Scientology and how long I've been speaking out a little bit more publicly. I really started paying attention in fall of 2020, which is when the TV show Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath was put onto Netflix. Mike Rinder is a co-host of the show, so he appeared in every episode. And after starting to watch the show, it pretty quickly became one of my favorite shows. And it quickly got to the point where every time I would watch an episode, the next day I'd be thinking about that episode and I'd want to learn more about whatever it was I just learned about. So I started reading Tony Ortega's website, The Underground Bunker. I started reading Mike's blog. I read Blown for Good, Mark Headley's book. Mark Headley being another board member of the Aftermath Foundation and ex-Scientologist who has been speaking out for years. I started watching Aaron Smith Levin's channel. I started watching Chris Shelton. When Leah Remini and Mike Rinder did their Fair Game podcast, I listened to as much of that as I could. Now, it was September of 2023 that I first attended a hearing related to Scientology, and it was the sentencing for ex-Scientologist Danny Masterson. That's not the focus of this video, but just to quickly remind folks, Danny Masterson is a Scientologist. He's an actor known for that 70s show. And in May of 2023, he was convicted on 2 counts of forcible SA. And in September, he was sentenced to 30 years to life. Now, Scientology played a fairly large role in the trial because all of the women who he abused were Scientologists at the time of the assaults. And being that they were all Scientologists, they were not allowed to report him to the police. So they reported him to the church, and the church helped bury it for decades, which is why it took so long to convict him. Now, after attending the sentencing, later that same month in September of 2023, I attended a protest, which was put on by Alexa Nicholas of Eat Predators. It was a great experience, and Alexa is a good friend of mine to this day, and I met other people at that protest who are good friends of mine to this day. The next month, in October of 2023, after more ex-Scientologists and more folks in the community became aware of that first protest that Eat Predators put on in September, another protest was organized, and at this one, I actually got to help interview some people. I had become friends with Alexa at that point, and I collaborated with her on thinking about who was going to be at the protest, who might we be able to interview. And at that point, because I had just paid slightly closer attention to the history of abuse in the Church of Scientology, Alexa trusted my judgment, which I really appreciated about her. And I got to hold the microphone and I got to interview some people. So I got to talk to Jeffrey Augustine and Karen De La Carriere, Liz Ferris, Lara. It was a fun experience, largely because all of those people are people who I've been watching. So to actually get to be the one conducting the interview, it was exciting for me. Now, it was shortly after that that William Good and Jessica Palmadessa and other folks started live streaming their protests against Scientology. So it was in December of 2023 when Scientology leader David Miscavige gave a speech at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. that I got to meet many of them for the first time. And it was shortly after that, in early 2024, in this year, that I started live streaming to my own channel. Now, a reality is that many of the protests ended up not necessarily consisting of what most people might think of when they hear the word protest. Many of these consisted of just conversations, just several folks holding their cameras, holding their selfie sticks. As I say there, really, I should say we. But I made friends. I got to stand in solidarity with other like minded people, have conversations, hear survivors tell their stories. And I'm getting into this, and I want to bring it back to Mike because there's one day in particular that I feel bad about, and that I want to explain why for a moment. In April of 2024, there was a protest at a federal building in Los Angeles against the IRS. And of course, the Church of Scientology has tax exempt status. They are recognized as a 501c3 organization, which not only means that they don't have to pay taxes, but it also means that they are not subject to the same oversight by the government that corporations would be subject to, which enables them to shield themselves from prosecution and accountability while also putting no limit on how much money they're able to bring in. Now, I won't get into all of the circumstances that led up to this protest, but long story short, I was reached out to by two moderators from somebody else in the community who talked to me about the idea of protesting at this federal building against the IRS, and I was totally on board with it. Now, I didn't find out until the day before the protest that the two people who I was talking to lived outside of California and would not be at the protest. I also realized that there was a flyer that had been shared which listed me as the lead coordinator for the protest. So I thought that I was agreeing to be at the protest. I didn't realize I was agreeing to lead the protest. So it was a bit of an awkward situation, but I reached out to people and we did end up protesting. And I was glad to be able to do it. I made a sign that listed the EIN numbers for a handful of Scientology's various corporate entities with instructions for how people could report the Church of Scientology to the IRS. And we didn't have a huge crowd there, but some people did come, which I really appreciated. Now, like I said, a lot of these protests ended up being or looking like less of what people might typically imagine when they hear the word protest, and it ended up being a lot of conversation. Now, a lot of the conversation actually was great. Now, unfortunately, an uncomfortably significant amount of the conversation that was had that day in front of the federal building was negative conversation about Mike Rinder. Now, I did not participate in piling on with negative comments about Mike. In fact, some of them did make me a little bit uncomfortable, as he is somebody who I have continued to feel supportive of. I've continued to admire him. But I didn't argue. And at the end of the day, the fact is, I was listed as the lead coordinator of that protest. And a lot of my stream consisted of people speaking badly about Mike Rinder while I didn't say anything to defend him. And the people who were speaking unkindly about Mike were ex-Scientologists. And like I was saying earlier, as somebody who's not an ex-Scientologist, I didn't feel that it was my place at a protest that's meant to amplify the voices of the victims of Scientology to be arguing with ex-Scientologists. There's a lot more that has been said over the last year or so. I'm a little bit hesitant about how specific I even want to get. But the bottom line is that a lot of ex-Scientologists, a lot of people in the community have been involved in pointing fingers at each other, and I've done my best to stay out of it. I've often just felt that I didn't have much to add and that there just wasn't much of a reason for me to add fuel to any fire. And believe me, that's not my goal at all right now, to add fuel to any fire. But after seeing all of the hard work and admirable work that Mike Rinder has done over the last 4 years, he's been active for longer than that, but that's just about how long I've been paying attention. It really did make me sad to see him in his current state in the videos that he's recently posted to his channel. And it's also made me sad to see the ways that some have responded. And I don't want to name names at this time, but I wanted to come on here, catch up with you all a little bit because it's been a little while. And at this point, like I said, Mike has exhausted the efficacy of 2 cancer drugs. And he's at a point where the traditional medicinal means of fighting cancer, he's gone through them. He's continuing to go through them. So at this point, I think his main focuses in life, as they should be, are on spending time with his family, on being loving toward those that are in his circle and in his corner. Because at this point, I would love, and I know many others would love, to see him go into radical remission. I'd love to see him fight in Scientology the way that many of us have known him to do in the past. I mean, I loved seeing him on Going Clear and on the Aftermath TV show, hearing him in the Fair Game podcast, reading his daily blog posts. And at this point, he might not have the capacity to be active in the way that he once was. So I want to use the opportunity that I have to amplify his voice, send out all the support and love that I can. I'm not a particularly religious person, but for those who are, if you're the praying type, I encourage you to keep Mike in your prayers. I also wanted to share that I do have my Mike Rinder bobblehead here. And this was sent to me by Mark and Claire Headley. And they've got the SP shop. Of course, SP stands for suppressive person, which is an enemy of Scientology. And they call their shop their SP shop where special people shop. But for those who don't know, this and the idea for the Mike Rinder bobblehead initially came from actually a cruel joke that David Miscavige used to play on Mike Rinder back when Mike Rinder was a spokesman for the Church of Scientology. David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, in an attempt to psych Mike out before he had to go out on stage, would pull out a Mike Rinder dummy and play with it and change his voice and make fun of Mike and get in Mike's head before Mike had to address the Scientology world. So now Mark and Claire sell these, and all proceeds go to the Aftermath Foundation, which helps people to leave Scientology. Another thing that I've got on is my SP bracelet. I don't know if y'all can see the SP in the middle there. That's also available on the SP shop. And I really miss the days that Mike and Mark and Claire and friends used to regularly do their live streams, their Q&As. Mark and Claire have gotten into it some more lately, which I've loved to see. But anyway, I'd say I've said most of what I wanted to pop on here to say. But in the midst of all of the drama, all of the confusion, all of the pointing fingers that goes on, I encourage people to seek out the truth. I encourage people to listen. Power to survivors, as Alexa of Eat Predators likes to say. And at the end of the day, I encourage you all to be well. I'll scroll through the chat a bit. I don't plan to stay on here for too long. But thank you to everybody who has tuned in. Hi, Kara. Hi, MD Media. I see Peter says, there is no one that has done more to advocate for the victims of Church of Scientology than Mike Rinder. There is no one even close. His bravery, his intellect, his humanity, and his honesty are unparalleled. Thanks for sharing that, Peter. I do see Kara says, Jacob, I'm convinced that IRS thing was a setup by a Scientologist acting as a Reddit mod. I actually don't think so. I've seen some people suggest that. I know who it was that organized the protest. I'm not naming them right now. There's no beef there. I really think it was a series of miscommunications more than anything else, and I'm really not here to bag on anybody for the slightly awkward situation that I found myself in when I ended up agreeing to lead the protest without realizing that was what I was agreeing to. But thank you. It's good to see you in here, Kara. Hey, Mandy. Thanks for being here. Kara says, I just rewatched the video of you meeting Laura for the first time yesterday. Yeah, so that was at that first protest at Big Blue in September of 2023, just a few weeks after the Danny Masterson sentencing. And I recognized Laura from YouTube at that time. That was my first time meeting her. I can say that she's probably the best friend that I've made in this space since I've started protesting against Scientology. I've certainly spent the most time with her off camera. But Laura's great. She just had a show over the weekend that I unfortunately wasn't able to make it to, but I texted with her a little bit beforehand, and I think she may even be doing a live stream in a little bit later tonight, so I'll be sure to check that out. All right. Well, thank you to everybody who is in here. Thank you to everybody who is watching on the replay crew. I definitely would love to get back on here soon, as a lot has happened in the world recently. There's a lot that I'd love to comment on. But in the meantime, the main purpose of this video is to give my love and support to Mike. Oh, you know what? I mentioned the bobblehead, and I mentioned the bracelet. One other thing that I've got here is Mike's book, A Billion Years, My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology by Mike Rinder. And I bought the book as soon as it was available for pre-order. Now, after I received my copy, or perhaps it was before I received my copy, but after I had pre-ordered it, Mike announced that he was going to be signing some copies and making those available. So I immediately got one of those, and I ended up with 2 copies of the book. But I posted a series of stories on Instagram talking a little bit about the book and about Mike, and mentioning that I now have 2 copies of the book, and that if anybody was interested, that I'd be happy to send it to him. So I sent it to a friend from middle school who I actually hadn't talked to in years, who swiped up on my story and was interested and has now taken a deep dive into the abuses of Scientology. So that was a fun little moment to spread the good word out there. I've got an autograph from Mike in here. It says, "Thank you," from Mike Rinder. And now, after all that Mike has done for the community, after all that Mike has done to stand up for victims of Scientology, I think it'd be great if we could all send our love and support to him. Now, I wouldn't bank on hearing a response from Mike right now, because in his current condition, he likely does not have the capacity to respond to everybody. But he's mentioned in recent videos that he's posted that he's reading all of the comments on YouTube and on Facebook and on his blog. And so if you do choose to send him words of support or encouragement, I'm sure that he would appreciate it. And I would appreciate it. All right. With that, folks, I hope everybody stays well. I hope everybody continues to seek out the truth. Stay safe, everybody. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.